Call this workshop of the Bryan Independent School District to order. Let the record show that a quorum of board members is present and this workshop has been duly called and that notice of this workshop has been posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code Chapter 551. This time, do we have any citizens' comments? No. In that case, we will move straight down into the regular agenda, starting off with discussion purchase request for advancement via individual determination, or AVID.
Good afternoon. Today, Dr. Molina and I are bringing forth AVID for discussion about purchasing their services. Some of you are familiar with AVID, but AVID stands for Advancement via Individual Determination. And their mission is to close the opportunity gap by preparing students for college readiness and success in a global society. We feel that their secondary services meet several needs that we have been trying to address and that teachers have brought forward as something that they need help with and something that we've also seen in our data. And so the first of the services is the AVID elective. This is a class that students join. It would be in replace of their CE class period. Students learn note-taking, organization, study skills. They also have the opportunity to receive tutoring in their pre-AP or honors level classes that they're enrolled in. This is a great strategy to meet something that a lot of our teachers have really had an outcry about, is that students are not prepared for pre-AP, AP, honors level coursework, and they really need a support system. And so AVID is definitely a strong support system to help those students succeed in those classes. And then, of course, it's also very tightly aligned to board goals, especially in CCMR. And so this is helping more students get to that, meet those CCMR criteria. The next service is, and we are somewhat familiar with the AVID elective. Our district has had it in the past, but the AVID Excel is brand new to our district. And so this is something that, as we were investigating AVID elective again, we found AVID Excel. And this is a service specifically for our students who are emergent bilingual in middle school. It is also a class that would take the place of their CE class. What it provides is intense instruction in language acquisition. And so in addition to their English classroom, they have AVID Excel, and they practice reading and writing and vocabulary and all of the things around language acquisition. These students are not co-enrolled in an honors or pre-AP like their traditional AVID elective. The goal is that in 7th and 8th grade, students their academic skills are bolstered enough that by the time they're registering for 9th grade, they are strong enough to go into those pre-AP classes and honors and AP. And then obviously they can continue with the AVID support into high school. And then our third service that we have been looking at is the AVID Summer Bridge. There are 2 math summer bridge that we would like to host. One is for 6th going into 7th, and one is 7th going into 8th. This is for students who either did not in the past choose advanced math, and they would like to try advanced math in the next year, and so this gives them some weeks of additional math instruction to prepare for that. Or if they were not as strong in their math skills. We have all seen with pandemic that math seems to really be a struggle point for some of our kids. And so this gives them an opportunity to repeat some of the things they've seen, just in an attempt to ensure that they've got that mastery that they're going to need in 7th and 8th grade, because that is a compact curriculum that does move faster and students need that extra support. And then the third summer bridge program from AVID is called Mission Possible. And it is a very hands-on active science camp that students participate in for 3 weeks. And they are given these little missions throughout the camp that they have to use their science skills that they learned in 7th grade to accomplish.
So let me just make sure we're going to be doing more stuff in the summer. Is that what I'm hearing.
Yes, this is three summer camps bringing into the summer.
Yay.
And so we've got looking at all the different ways how the curriculum fits with ours right now, making sure that we have all the supplies, looking at can we pull this off. And so this is the first important step to make sure that we have y'all's support in doing all of that.
I do have a question. I don't want to interrupt too much, but I don't know if what you're getting ready to, you did pause for a little bit. So
Yes,
I'm thinking,
go
okay.
for it.
But, when we had Avid, and you were, I don't know, you were probably around when we had Avid. So do you know what the reasons were for discontinuing Avid?
I'm sorry.
We had Avid here before.
Right.
So do you know what the reasons were for discontinuing Avid?
So I had been previously the Avid district director, but I transitioned out of that role into the Bryan Collegiate principal. And so I wasn't in on all the conversations, but I do know that a lot of it had to do with the Avid, the very strict requirements they had for certification. We spent a lot of time checking, did we do this, did we do this? For example, one of the requirements was that every single summer you had to send a full site team to the Avid Summer Conference. And that, pulling on people's time, all of those things. And so it was elements like that, there were more than just that became very difficult to continue. And so now Avid has, I guess not as strict is the best way to put it. And so initially in the first summer, you do send a full site team. And you do a lot of things to gear up for Avid, but then as you sustain Avid, you're not doing as strict things as what they used to have in the certification process.
Do the yearly Avid teachers teach these summer programs?
No, we would actually pick math and science teachers because we really need them to be strong in the content areas. Now, it may coincidentally be somebody who's been identified as an Avid site team member or a future Avid elective teacher, but we want to be sure the content is there. Did you want to say anything?
And just to add, we were looking at the data, and there is definitely an underrepresentation of our EB students in our advanced high school courses at both of the comprehensive high schools. There's only 39% that are taking those courses compared to a little bit over 50% of their peers. So that's one thing to consider as well.
And so with the Avid Excel in 7th and 8th, the idea is that they're really going to have those skills and the academic content that they need to be successful entering into, say, like a pre-AP English or pre-AP Math into high school. So as you, let's see. So this is what, as we looking at the contract, this is what's included in the contract for each one of these services. And then we have the 3-year projection. This is for both middle schools, SFA and Davila, and Bryan Collegiate to participate. For Avid elective, we're looking at ESSER funds, Garrett funds, as well as Title II. For Avid Excel, Dr. Molina is going to address that with Title III funds, and then using ESSER funds to cover Summer Bridge program.
So how many students would we be hoping to include in this program, and how will they be identified?
The identification is going to take place a little bit differently in year one than it will after the year one. Right now, we're doing a lot of teacher recommendations, looking at data to identify students who are good candidates, and that sort of thing. In future years, it'll be a lot more talking to students, talking to parents, and getting them to apply to be part of Avid, that they indicating that they want to do it. And so right now, it'll be a lot on our end, digging in to find those kids and telling them about Avid and wanting them to join. As far as the number, it's up to us. It's up to how many FTEs do they want to dedicate to it and how many students can they recruit to be involved in it. Once upon a time, many moons ago, when I was the Avid teacher at Bryan High School, I was the only teacher. I had a full teaching day, but that was it. When I left, there were 3 Avid teachers. So it's, we can decide how many or how few students that we want to offer the service to.
So the cost that we see here is kind of the same, regardless of how many teachers are engaged?
Correct. For this, yes. This is the contract for Avid. Obviously, if we wanted to add more teachers, there's the cost of the FTE and those sorts of things.
Right.
But this is for the Avid services itself. Correct. Thank you for that clarification.
Right.
They are reallocating FTEs that they already have in place to provide the Avid classroom.
And Christina, for a point of reference, I know at Bryan Collegiate specifically, they have PCC, which is I guess a Bryan ISD version similar. So for that point of reference, how many kids are we serving in that model that would eventually go away as we move on to Avid?
The Avid classroom would essentially become what was PCC. And so at Bryan Collegiate, every student is expected to participate. And so every freshman would be in Avid 1 elective, every sophomore Avid 2 elective, and so forth.
So, I know different districts might do it different, but, so if a student, say, begins in Avid their sophomore year, they would finish their career out in Avid?
Yes, ma'am. Each year is vertically aligned. It's a little bit different. There are some skills that carry through all 4 years, or both of the high school, middle school years. Those real foundational ones such as organization, note-taking, those types of study skills, time management. But then each year there's also things that change. They change the types of writing that they do. They change, what career activities they do, what college research activities they do. By senior year, it's very focused on applying to college. So they're, actually downloading applications and writing their essays and looking at scholarships.
And I had one other question. So for students who engage in Avid, is it taking the place of another elective, or?
No, it's taking the place of their CE, their curriculum enrichment, or at Double O they call it Texas and Success. And so it's taking the place of that class. It's not taking the place of an elective.
So is there any data on this that shows this is effective? Because I know when I asked for data on PCC, there was no data to show that students that participate in PCC do better than students who don't.
Yeah, Avid is well researched. It is one of the What Works activities that is recommended. I don't have data with me, but I can tell you from previous experience, it had good results in our district. And it has nationwide all kinds of research and data out there that if you want, I can find some things for you.
Well, I was just looking, we're talking $80,000 of our ESSER funds to change something, and I just wondered.
I'm on their website.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's supported.
Yeah, there's lots of schools that are doing it now and have been doing it, and you could take the schools that are comparative to our kids and use that as your data, and,
Yeah.
I mean, it's
There's
huge.
data that shows their college acceptance rates are higher than non-Avid students. There's data that shows their participation rates after graduation, so their continuation in college, have higher results than non-Avid students.
And they have the reclassification rates for the EB students are higher, and then on TELPAS as well, the scores are higher for the emergent bilingual students. Because of the academic language, the listening, speaking, reading, and writing in those programs, it really helps accelerate the English language acquisition at the higher levels of cognition.
When this was alive and well before, and I know it's not really that much difference, probably even just that much more intense, we thought of it as, these are students that typically don't have the mom sitting at the dinner table with them at night writing their essays for college. These are the kids that may work, parents work all the time, and don't have time to get ready for those applications for college. Typical might be first person in the family to head to college. So nobody knows how to get that child there. Filling out the FAFSA. I mean, all the things that many of our population just don't know, or their parents don't have time to do. that's what they do in Avid.
And personally, I grew up in a home of a single mom who worked all the time and had not gone to college herself. And so I didn't know to take any advanced academics in high school. The only reason I even took the SAT is because a friend of mine happened to be filling out her forms and was asking me, when are you doing it? I'm like, doing what? I don't know what you're talking about. And so thankfully I had that friend. And so we have so many families that want so many great things for their kids, but understanding the road to get there is not always easy, and it is time intensive. And so if you're working multiple shifts, if you have more than just one child, that you have more kids to care for, it can be absolutely difficult to realize all of these components that are best for your student when trying to prepare for college. And so Avid really does help educate the whole family. In the past, we've seen, actually there's quite a few teachers in our district who are former Avid students, and they'll talk about their experience that they were then able to help their little brothers and sisters. And so it becomes educating a whole family and not just one student.
And see, that's something I like what you said there, the teachers in our district that utilize the Avid. And that's something we've never heard, or I've never heard it in 13 years, so I didn't know that. But is there a way we'll be able to say, once we identify those children, once we do whatever it is that we're going to do in the program for the children, that we can see some results to be able to say, this child was in Avid, and this is what the benefit was, this is where they went. So they will know. I know some of the problem we had before is that, well, where are they at?
Yeah.
Well, what are they doing? Well, did it work? How many did it work for? How many were in there? And there was never any one answer to really know, were we
Right.
going down the right path? Was it actually helping anyone? Could we actually go back and say that it helped this child because this is where they were at?
In the past, obviously, we didn't have as great data collecting tools as we do now. And so I've actually already been having conversations with Mike Coleman about ensuring that Avid students are identified in PEAMS so that they can have data in 5Lab. That we would be able to pull, it's an Avid student and here's ACT, it's an Avid student and here's their enrollment and all of those types of things. And so 5Lab is going to be important in gathering data for while they're in our district. And then I'm anxious to learn what Avid has to track students after graduation. So much has changed in their system. I'm just now diving in, and I see lots of resources of how they are electronically doing a lot of things. And so I want to see if they have a way of tracking Avid students past graduation. And if not, then that's a system that we'll have to develop in-house.
And I think if we start looking at the correlation between the CCMR, their TSI, their admittance into the military, then we can start at least from 12th grade and see the connection to where they're headed afterwards. When they leave us, it's a life and decisions and so forth, but when we hit those CCMR markers, I think that's going to be a good indication for those students if they were successful.
Yeah, and that's, you tie that back on one of your previous slides to the CCMR. So I think there's actually two measurements on there that I would like to really focus in on, and one is algebra 8th grade. How many, if they're going through the summer school, the middle school algebra bridge,
Yeah.
how many were successful in completing algebra there? And I think that's a good first step because we know that algebra is a gateway course, just so much more in life. If you don't start that in 8th grade, there's it provides other issues. And the other thing is, I would like to identify what we're going to measure within the CCMR, meaning that, I would like to get down to if they take a, AP test and successfully count that. Is that the gateway, the flag that we're looking for? Unfortunately, I don't think we can really look at military readiness yet, because I don't know if there's a good way to track that. But I think we can with AP. And one of the reasons I bring that up is because I still think there's a kind of an ongoing issue with the cost of the AP test. I know it fluctuates, and I know it comes down, and I know there's free and reduced lunch breaks and all that kind of stuff. But I know over the last couple of years, I've heard individuals say they didn't take the test just because they weren't going to pay the money, or their family wasn't going to pay the money, and they weren't going to go through. And so if we see that as being part of the issue, what I would like to even just kind of throw out to kind of strategize is how can we offset that cost for our avid students? As one of the perks, you know, we pay for your AP test, if it's one or many.
Yeah.
You know,
Sir, and that, when I was teaching at Bryan High, that was actually something that Bryan High did do at that time period for avid students.
and I know it always hits when my kid's up for the most test that they don't pay for it. But I know there was one semester with the twins that I had to pay over $800 for all of their AP tests. And it was there were two of them taking obviously multiple tests.
So hard to have smart children. It's so hard.
But at the end of the day, it's expensive. It's very expensive.
And
But at the end of the day, and so, I mean, it wavers back and forth. But just like we've seen kind of a new program or a different way of looking at things with A&M coming down and saying, hey, you know, identifying students that if you graduate, you know, we're going to give you a scholarship to A&M to come in. And we've had some students here, some eighth graders that have seen that. You know, how can we also leverage kind of that same mindset and say, if you put the time in here, because here's where it's important. If you put the time in here, then we're going to set you up for success over here, and we're going to take away all the barriers for you to be successful. I think that's I don't know if we have to do that. I don't know if that's, you know, but I do think that if we're going to truly use a metric like the AP test within our ranking scores, then we have to do everything we can to remove all the barriers that we possibly can. And I'm not saying that has to come out of Barbara's budget, although she's got a good one. But I mean, maybe that's something that we reach out and find corporate sponsors for. Maybe that's something that we reach out and find. We hit up Fuji for, or you know, some of our corporate partners to say, hey, can you help offset these very real costs for our students internally? But
And we had a side conversation about, you mentioned how students would be identified initially looks different further on down the line. But just to be clear, kids who do this in 7th or 8th grade, that's not the pipeline necessarily for doing it in high school. Like those might, you know, if they did it in 7th or 8th grade, they might be doing it in high school, but there might be other kids who would do it in high school.
yes,
Okay.
that is true, sir.
I'm not for a moment suggesting that we can get away from being data-driven, and that's obviously what we have to do. But I think something like this is, and along with just about everything, in my opinion, in education, it's so hard to be scientific. If you look up the definition of the scientific method, it's like, okay, we've got all these constants in one variable, and we're going to change the variable, and then we're going to see the result. Well, it'd work pretty well if you had 100 or so identical students and with identical families, and of course that doesn't exist. So all I'm suggesting is that we can't get away from data, but I think this really merits making sure we are talking to students and getting anecdotal evidence of how this worked or didn't work for them, and what did they think the effect was. And that's a whole lot different than, I mean, maybe that's still data, but it's really obviously very subjective. The student is not necessarily going to say, well, I did this much better than I would have. They probably don't even know, but they can certainly say whether it seemed to make a difference in their lives. And so I'm just suggesting that as much as we like hard and fast data, that the opinions of the students and the parents are going to be, I think, a big factor on whether this is successful or not.
There's definitely an element of AVID that is difficult to measure because it's about building relationships. Donna was the AVID counselor, I was an AVID teacher. Parents thought of us as moms on the campus all the time, that encouraging them, building their confidence. And so it was more than scores, you're absolutely right. And if you ask former AVID students who are around our district, one is actually on the superintendent's parent committee. There are former AVID students who are teachers in our district, and it meant a lot to them beyond just the academic part of it, but that connection that they felt to their school and that connection that they felt to somebody who could help them.
Well, I've heard good things about it over the years, just as we go to different activities and, are we an AVID school? And we weren't. So, part of me is thankful that we're trying to do something relational on those campuses to help improve data down the road. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we want our students to be successful, whatever that looks like.
Any other questions? All right, thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
All right, next up is a discussion, another discussion item concerning Pacific Northwest Partnership.
Hi there, good afternoon. So you'll notice we have a full team coming to visit with
Everybody
the board
come,
and
yeah.
discuss, because this particular topic regarding professional learning is a very team-oriented approach. What we're proposing to you today for consideration in the future is professional learning designed and responsive to teaching, learning, and classroom environment and the culture of a campus. And so the whole team came together to talk with you today. So I'm going to kick it off and turn it over to Mrs. Goodman. She actually started this work years ago and can talk to us about how that began.
Okay, back in 2018, I was given the task of heading the Culture and Climate Task Force. And out of this task force, we recommended to the board some district-wide strategies with CHAMPS, PBIS, and I believe we also recommended the Essential 8. What we're doing is building on the existing foundation. It's more focused to the positions at the campus level, your teachers, your administrators, and your paras, and addressing the Tier 1 instruction. While we did the PBIS, it was a very modified presentation or rollout, and it was campus-wide. And what we're looking to do is make it more specific to the position.
And the next thing we're going to talk about is the impact of the pandemic, which we've stood before you many times and brought up, but it's real. There was an interruption in learning, which we've talked about a lot. There was an interruption in that social development of our students, that year and a half that they did not get to interact in the way that they've always been able to interact. And then there was great impact on the emotional, mental health of both our students and our staff. And with that time out, it also interrupted some of the trainings that we would have done with staff, some of that professional development. So if you put together, like we talked about, interruption in learning and social emotional, and just the effects on the mental health of folks, it's the big picture. It's not one part of it. It's all of this together that we need assistance moving forward to make sure we develop the whole child and we take care of our staff.
Building on that, when we talk about what do our staff really want and what are they asking us for, the fall survey, it echoes everything you just heard. What they would like is position-specific training on how to support students and how to support each other at the same time. So what's the school-wide culture and climate look like under PBIS? We want to build on that. It's already in place, but how do we make it more robust, more tight-knit, and more effective? Further, what does it look like for a classroom teacher versus a paraprofessional in the classroom supporting teachers and students? How does that leadership training look for campus administrators? So the employee survey, loud and clear, said they wanted position-specific professional learning that would help them work with kids in different capacities.
And it also fits with where we're going to find funding with the ESSER purpose. When you remember the legislature approved the funding, it was for a period of time, and then it would eventually run out. And so what you're going to see a little bit longer, a little bit shorter, is on slide number 9, you're going to see actually the cost breakdown, and where there's an initial cost, and then it gradually goes down to a point of real sustainability. So when we get to slide 9, that'll be real evident. But it meets not only kind of the ESSER, the funding formula, but it also meets the goal of ESSER in the academic, social, emotional, and mental health needs of our students. It definitely addresses those.
So what we're bringing to you is not a one singular answer. We're bringing to you a team approach and a system of services to support campuses and students. Mrs. Goodman's already mentioned the E8 character education. That's in place. It's continuing. We do need to go deeper with it, and we intend to go deeper with it. Dr. Merrill was speaking this morning about some ideas on how that might look a little differently and more of a daily impact at the high school level in particular. We're also looking at the social emotional learning, which is Mrs. Willis going to talk to in a little bit. And then the last 3 sections over on the left-hand side of your screen, foundations, training for all, and leadership, behavior, and support. We're going to speak to those in more detail here in just a moment. But I think it's important to understand that all of these things are in some way and shape in place in Bryan ISD, but we need to go further with them. And that's what we're proposing to you. Mrs. Dwayne, I was channeling you earlier. I'm not sure how that happened, but the research to support the implementation. As early as 2016, there was a full study on a much larger urban district about the effectiveness of implementation on that school system with training such as this. And so I do have that referenced on there, and I can bring it to you. But let's talk first about what we've done differently this year, and the board's actually already approved this out of the ESSER funds previously, and it's the SEL curriculum that Mrs. Willett is implementing.
Social emotional learning obviously is incredibly important, and this year as we were doing research, I found a curriculum called Change Makers. It's out of the Momentous Institute out of Dallas, and it's on the TEA website as one of their approved sources for social emotional learning. This program is focusing at elementary, where this year we made a huge push just at 2nd grade, starting to teach the students the skills on how to self-regulate and how to control their emotions. And so we have started, and it's going incredibly well, and right now we're looking at how do we expand that to all of the grade levels at elementary. We purchased in-hand curriculum for 2nd grade, and then received digital versions of the other of elementary, and we're looking at adding an additional. We are seeing positive changes, one student, one classroom at a time, but it is starting to make a difference.
So aside from E8 and from the SEL curriculum, we want to go further, like I said, with the position-specific training that's already in place, the CHAMPS discipline in the classroom. And so for that, we have role-specific training that Mrs. Goodman will explain.
Okay, so all of our teachers and administrators will receive the CHAMPS and discipline in the secondary classrooms. Again, this is the same language. We did a modified version of this with the rollout of the task force. But now it's addressing the tier 1 classroom behaviors and giving our teachers strategies in the classroom to address concerns. Then our administrators will participate in the coaching classroom management, and this is teaching them and training them on how to support the teachers in the classroom and be consistent campus-wide. One thing that we've not focused on, and that's the instructional, our paraprofessionals, and we have the parapro. And the great thing about all 3 trainings, our staff will receive them prior to the start of school in August.
All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is the foundations. And this is an exciting opportunity for our staff. It involves, as you'll see there, not only the campus principal, the assistant principal, but also teachers and support staff. So it really works and builds upon collaboration. It's really paramount. The title, Foundations, really could just, it's a beautiful name because it does provide, in so many ways, the groundwork from which you build up. It is data-centered. They look at referrals. They look at all types of data to understand where are they coming from, where can we put implementation, where do we need to be more clear. And so with that administrative team, or that, not administrative team, that core team, a district administrator sits on it as well. And so they're going to go through year one, will be a 4 two-day professional learning sessions. Year 2 will be 4 two-day professional learning sessions. Year 3 will be reduced to 4 days total. And it really establishes that groundwork, that framework, that foundation from which you build up that everything else kind of models after and adds to. In addition to this training, there's going to be one called Leaders, and this is more specific for our campus principals. One of the great things about involving and really partnering with them is they've walked this path all over the nation. So they're working not only with Bryan ISD and multiple districts within the state of Texas, but really across the nation, and not only in the 50 states, but outside. And so it's been interesting to hear all the way in Alaska and some of those relationships. And so they've walked this path, and they've given us some specific examples. So problems and those types of things are really easy for them to help solve and really partner with. And I can say from our perspective, it really has been a partnership.
So in keeping with that, one of the things we wanted to do is experience some of this training before we ever brought it to you for a proposal to go further with it. We needed to see how our staff responded to it, see the quality of the resources and materials. If we're going to take it to the next level, are we pleased with where that would be going? And so I've asked Dr. Casper to join us. She's been participating with her campus and individually in the leadership training, leadership and behavior supports, but then also with her teachers. So we've asked her to come and speak on behalf of what she's experienced so far.
So I love to learn, and I've been in the district 20 years, and anytime I get an opportunity to try something new, I mean, it just rejuvenates you. And what we've done so far has just been amazing. So yes, we already have done all the foundations for this work, but you have to keep learning in order to, well, one, remember what it is you're supposed to be doing, but two, to keep making improvements. You know, whenever I've moved to a new campus and I tell everybody what I want to do, they all know when I get to that point, I'm still not happy, because then now my point is out here, and then my point's there. So this is that next point. We've got things here, but it's the next thing. So one of the things, well, what's so great about Safe and Civil Schools is for the leadership and behavior supports, the very first thing we did was go through the book and talk to her about what we wanted out of this book, which things interested us, which things applied to us. And so she's been tailoring that based on what the principals gave her feedback for. And so that's been really helpful. We also when we started, kind of told her about our different campuses and what we needed. And mine was, you know, the apathetic behaviors, the lack of motivation. I kind of deal with that a lot. And so that was just, it's really good. We have another one tomorrow. So I'm looking forward to seeing Susan again tomorrow. For discipline in the secondary classroom, we actually were able to do that with our last PD days. So I was able to put all of my MC Harris and DAP staff. I did teachers and paras that are in the classroom through the training. It was so good. Like, we'd go to breakout sessions. They're like, oh, now I remember from Champs, or that's the why behind this. And just, it was so good. My really tenured teachers were just, like, it helped them to remember, yeah, I just can't copy someone else's Champs and make that work in my room. There's a reason why I develop what I develop. So that was really good, and we're continuing to grow off that. But probably my new favorite thing is the power hour sessions. Like, I'm texting Barbara, this is so good. So we were given the opportunity to sign up for these, and there were two that just caught my eye. Last week was connecting with students who are disconnected, which is like our world right now. And the other one is over spring break. It's about apathetic behaviors. But last week was probably the best training. It was the fastest hour, but it was the best training I've had in a really, really long time. And it was good not only for me for dealing with students, but with my staff, because I still have some very disconnected staff. the pandemic took a toll on them too, and some of them just haven't reconnected. And so I know I'm supposed to keep this short, I'm sure, but I have to tell you this because it's so good. And it deals so much with where I live now in the district. So she started off by telling us that students who are connected to school are more likely to wear their seatbelt. And so she had us put things in the chat about why we think that's true. And so it comes down to trust. They trust that that seatbelt is going to do something for them. So what we need to do as administrators and teachers is get kids to trust that what we are doing is for them and not to them. So that was on Tuesday. So on Wednesday, I turned that around for MC Harris PLCs and JJC. And Thursday, I turned it around for DAEP staff. And DAEP is a to-them kind of place. But they were so into talking about what they could do to shift that to for them. So what could we do once they're here to help them to see what we're doing here is for them? And then, I started thinking about how that applies to my staff as well. How do I help them to see the things that I'm doing, the coaching I do, is for them and not to them? And that was just so powerful. And the way that I'm looking at what we're doing on, in our settings. And I shared it with JJC staff and with the county, and they were thinking too, how do we take what we're doing here so that people trust us that this is for them rather than to them? So my teachers are excited. They want to go to the training I did last week. So they were excited.
Thank you, Dr. Casper. You can see why I selected her, right?
And there's a reason we only put 2 items on the agenda today. So you have plenty of time, We want to make sure you had plenty of time.
So in looking at those position-specific trainings, looking at the foundations training that Dr. Merrill spoke to and the leadership and behavior support, we do have a start on some of those things. But when we talk about the full system, if we were to make it ubiquitous across all campuses, this is an outline and a sketch of what that timeline might look like. And so this spring, we would actually begin the foundations program with late spring. Don't get me wrong, we're like borderline almost summer. Late spring, borderline summer, we'd be working with campus administrators and their core teams to start the work that would be impactful for August. The company that we're working with suggested that if we start now, that's when you'd be able to feel it would be August, because it takes time for that team to come together, because that team doesn't make decisions in isolation. They bring it back to the full faculty to gain consensus, because you have to have consensus for implementation if you're going to have any consistency. So we would start that earlier rather than later. And then the teacher exchange days, those training days in the summertime, would be utilized for the position-specific training, CHAMPS for K through 8, and discipline in the secondary classroom for 9 through 12. Now, Dr. Casper's group has already had day 1, so they're already on their way, so they would have flexibility of choice in that TE day since they've already been through that foundational training. Building on to that, in August, all new staff that came in, since they didn't have the opportunity to come during the summertime, the trainers would be here again to offer that day 1 session for each of them, as well as all of our paraprofessionals who will be on contract at that time. And then in the fall semester, the board has built in PD days, so there is a time and a date for each group to get the second day of that position-specific training during the fall semester, and that's actually what they recommend. They recommend that you do not do 2 days back-to-back, that you do the first day, you go experience, work with it, try it, and then you come back for refinement and clarification. And so that's actually their model. Foundations would, of course, continue through that first year, as Dr. Merrill mentioned, into the spring semester. And with that, I think the powerful thing there is that it comes with individualized campus coaching. So the team works with the trainer and says, okay, here's the big issue that we're facing right now. When we look at our campus, this is our big need right now. How do we work on this? And then they design a plan with that team that they take back to the faculty to gain consensus, and then they roll out as a full team so that they're all on the same page. In essence, this would be the tentative timeline. Now, obviously, we have you here for a reason, and we're bringing it to you for a reason because it does cost. It is something that's been a request, but it is not something that we can do without your permission.
So
Before we get to this shocking page,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would we have got to convince our teachers that this is not the CHAMPS of old.
Yes.
You know, the walk-in where they had to have CHA and PS and had to be observable, and we had to write it, and it was just kind of okay, we're just gonna go through as soon as I get an evaluation, Champs is really, I mean, I don't mean to think our teachers did that, but some did, you know.
So let me
They
talk
got
about.
evaluated, and there was no more Champs.
So one of the things that would be new and different and why it's the next level of, rather than the poster on the wall is great, but what else is there to Champs other than that, right? There's a whole lot more. And so this training and part of the reason for the cost and the expenditure is it comes with a text. And by text, I mean like this thick of a text to go deeper into what that looks like for both Champs and then discipline in the secondary classroom. Dr. Casper can speak to the one that's on this page, the Teacher's Encyclopedia. And it actually gives you a list of all of the different situations, behaviors, or supports that might be there. And it gives you varying plans for how to support that student. If it's the first time you've seen it, try Plan A. If it's the third teacher that's talked to you about it and it's consistent, let's try Plan B. And there are multiple different pathways, and of course, you probably blend those together. But it takes you to do a customized plan to support the student as a team, which is very different than what we've had previously. Again, it's that next level of depth and complexity to what's currently in place.
So here's the slide, and I obviously made reference at the beginning of the presentation, just so everyone knew. We definitely want this to be sustainable. I'll say this, I've been here for 3 going on 4 years. I've yet to see anything that we really need the board doesn't say yes to. So I feel confident that if we didn't have ESSER money, say no to. So,
You say that before you show me 482.
but it's going to come from ESSER.
30, is that like manipulation?
No, it's not. I say that because we're using ESSER money. And it fits really, I mean, beautifully with what was handed down. And so it fits with, and Kevin's here to obviously back that up. But we know the board obviously believes and supports us. And so if we brought it to y'all, I have complete confidence in that. So, but we also wanted to make sure that we could sustain it. And so when you look at year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, it is definitely sustainable, and it fits with the idea of where the funding's coming from. That the balloon payment isn't waiting for us down the line in year 5, it's at the beginning when we've received the money. So that really becomes, I think, very, very important when you look at the last 2 years, what we've been addressing and what we've trying to get to. And so there's a system approach to this entire process that obviously takes a little bit of seed money to get it up and running, which is where the $482,000 comes. And then it goes down as the years progress. So Kevin's here to talk about some of the funding.
So then my question is going to be, if we do this $500,000 and Dr. Casper says, my staff is wanting this hour training that I had last week, can I give them that hour training, or is it going to cost me more money to do it?
So the power hour sessions are not included in this because we have individual custom sessions that are going to come through foundations and leadership and behavior support. This is something that the power hour sessions are something that Safe and Civil and Northwest Publishing put out randomly from time to time. And you buy that, we already have the text, which is the lion's share of the cost, but you don't, that kind of content comes within the sessions they're already in addition, we just haven't gotten them yet.
So sort of yes, but sort of no.
It's a blend of both, quite honestly.
They gave us the video and the script. I watched the video a couple more times. I scripted out my own notes, and I'm going to reproduce it.
Okay. Yes.
So it's not the majority of the costs either. When you look at what those costs in and of themselves, they're not the majority of it.
No, their resources are quite.
I'm just going more on the idea, like if we put this money
Right.
out there.
Turn it
is this a
around.
one-time thing, or is this something that we've invested in and now we get to keep using it over and over and over? Like,
So
is this something tangible that I'm investing in?
my husband works for the Region Service Center, and the text that Dr. Casper's noting there, the Encyclopedia of Teacher Student Support Behaviors, it is dog-eared. He trains on it all the time for Region 6. He takes it everywhere he goes. So that when he works with districts, he was in district last week, that's what he took. He's coaching a teacher on helping work with exactly the same situations we're dealing with and developing a customized plan on how to help a couple of students in her class. And so this is the text he goes back to and he keeps bringing forward for training. And the Champs book, he has several of them, all the ones up there that you just saw. And that ends up being a large part of the cost, are all of those more in-depth resources aside from the training.
We didn't have that with Champs before.
Correct.
In the training this time on Champs, when we did it last time, it was, this is what Champs is, this is how you do it. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm.
Okay, this time, well, one, it's a lot more in depth.
Yeah.
But you envision what you want your classroom to be like, and then it kind of leads you through a series of questions, but like Mr. Paris, who's been with the district forever, was like, okay, now I understand why we did it and what we were supposed to do, because it's just a checklist item. I have my Champs up on the wall, but you didn't put it, a lot of the thought behind, you
why.
you get the why with this, and then it makes it all make sense.
Right.
And so, it made a lot more sense to me, sitting through
And
this.
as teachers, especially, because now Rodney is younger than me, but he probably still likes having the curriculum, the book, the paper information, so he can just turn right to it. And now he's got that.
And it comes with all these reproducibles, and so like I put all those into a folder for them, but it has all these things for them to go back and do. It has that resource. But again, it made a lot more sense to people.
And Dr. Ibarra, will you elaborate, once we have the training and we own the resources, that
Yes.
in between the coaching sessions, et cetera,
We can turn them around.
right, we will build this into our district leadership team meetings, our principal PLCs. We're going to invest heavily in the leaders so that they can have faculty meetings, professional learning community meetings. So this will be going ongoing in an internal way.
So, and Mrs. Carabine, if I could continue in that conversation, Dr. Casper attended the Power Hour. We would host our own Power Hour specific to the behaviors we're seeing utilizing the resources that they could turn around to their faculties.
So Kevin will talk about some finances. At the bottom, it talks about where ESSER came from, meeting the academic, social, emotional, mental health needs of our students. This definitely does that.
Yeah, and Dr. Merrill did a great job of laying out how this all plays into the ESSER funding and what it was designed for. I mean, it was designed to be an intensive, structure so that it's hit hard up front very quickly because, you don't have a lot of time to make up the distance we have to with these kids. So these funds were actually put out to be used up in 2 to 3 years. They extend out, it's a 4-year grant, but of course you have to remember we go back to March of 20 when this all started. So by the time we started thinking about these things, we were already a year into the process. So a lot of these funds need to be utilized by September of 23 and definitely by September of 24. So you can see this process works pretty quickly and gets into that. So I mean, that's the way it was designed to be used, and that's what we believe we're utilizing it for. As far as the substance and all of those kind of things, I think they've done a great job from my standpoint of looking through things and getting us something that we feel will benefit the district and the students and our staff and build something that's going forward for the future. So, I mean, as far as utilizing the funds, the way it stair steps down and the intensity that we were going at it from the beginning works from our standpoint for finance purposes.
Where it says plus travel expenses, who's traveling?
So, a couple of things. This cost that you see up there is if every single training was individually booked separate and apart, meaning it was that set full rate. What they do is if you have a trainer here consecutive days, they actually discount that rate pretty significantly. And so the travel is there for the trainer to come in, but that full amount shouldn't be actualized because they're going to be in here multiple consecutive days. And so that actually comes off.
Okay. One of the things I like about this is that it's all the people and it's targeted to them. So administrators get their thing, but they also get the thing about how to coach others, and paraprofessionals get the things most relevant to them. So I really, I've heard of this before, but this is the most comprehensive kind of behavior intervention I've seen. It's good.
Oh, I'm in.
How does this
we talked about a little bit about PBIS training, or is this overlapping, or is we still gonna do the other, and is that going to be a big ticket item as well, the way we were
Well,
talking about doing?
and they can speak to it more so, but this training, Safe and Civil School, Randy Sprick in particular, is the developer, the original developer of PBIS. So it's taking what we launched, as Ms. Goodman mentioned, when we launched it initially, it was a modified version. So we're going back and reinvesting and going very deep with the model. This is the most legitimate version that you could ever have.
Under this, under Dr. Sprick's work, it's called Foundations. That's the training that is PBIS for this organization.
So we're not doing something else, and then
No, sir.
that's what I was.
It's the
Yeah.
original.
We felt it was in our best interest because PBIS is a legitimate, model to use. Many districts across the state and nation are using it. So it's not new and different, because there's nothing worse than telling a teacher that everything that they've learned is out the window and now we got a new version of something. So I think they will appreciate having some knowledge, some schema, if you will, and they'll know that we're building on it and we're going deeper. If you're new to the district and you don't know anything about foundations or PBIS, this is still the appropriate, very tailored, customized version. And I know I've talked to colleagues in other districts, because again, they mentioned across the state and nation, everyone is trying to figure out the playbook for pandemic and how to work with students who were out of school for a year and a half. Many of those districts are looking at their general funds to pay for it. We have the good fortune of having more ESSER money than many.
Yep.
So it's just a blessing that we have a funding source for this, and it's scalable and sustainable.
So Barbara, the principals are gonna be the ones to, pick who will be their teachers and their support staff on the team?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
It's also important to note, though, that every foundations team and every campus team will also have a district partner that will be with them the whole way, partnering, supporting, making sure things are on track, and then bringing back issues that as a team, we need to also support to see if there's anywhere else that has a similar situation.
It's with them. That's a key. What Karen said, I think, is really, really important. We do it with them.
So I assume this will be on our agenda for approval at a night meeting?
I think we're looking at the night meeting. And what I let them know is at the night meeting. I will concur with everybody and all the comments up here. I do like that it's comprehensive. I do like that, that it's both comprehensive, targeted, and I would, really strongly encourage that this, if we're going to make this investment, especially over the next 4 years, that we invest the marketing effort behind it, the internal promotion behind it, whatever we can do to make it, to really own it. And within that same area, I go back to slide 3 and look at the items that you had listed there. And I think one of the things around the Essential 8 in the character education was the almost universal buy-in of the community. And part of that universal buy-in was the engagement with the community. Now, I don't think we need to go out and buy a foundations book for everybody in the community, but the more that we can talk that same language going back in to the community and promoting those, I think is beneficial, whether there's as you mentioned, back into, the JDC and other areas that we can help support. I think we would be, that touch our students. I think that's important. But also if there's our own version of Power Hour for parents, or something that we can do.
That actually came up at our last DEIC meeting when I would discuss this with them. That's the exact recommendation one of the parents had for us is, do you have a version of that for me so I can use it at home too? Like they seriously were like, I want to mirror the language that the school is using in my home. That's exactly
And I think that's the key. I think that was the key of Essential 8. It was very easy for everybody to mirror that language. So maybe there's 8 terms.
Yep.
Maybe it starts out very, very simple, but I think anything that we can do to align it throughout the district. And with that, I'm going to have a kind of an oddball request, and we can take it out of board budget, but I would like to get a copy of each one of these for our board library, just so we have a reference point.
Yep.
If a teacher calls with a specific question or a parent calls, we have something that we can refer to as well.
Absolutely.
And Mr. McCall, speaking of alignment, I just met with Rhonda Watson, the executive, chief officer at the Boys and Girls Club, and she too is asking to partner with us and even maybe have some of the training to use the same language, terminology, alignment. So since she serves our kids, they'll see and hear that we're aligning our practices in that way.
And we know it's not it manifests itself easiest to see in a school environment, obviously, but it's not just a school problem for just the school to fix. And it's not one that we can fix without the engagement of parents and community. I might be radical in that opinion, but I think that, the way things go, but I think that the more that we can engage parents, the better.
Agreed.
Kids could, from first grade on, they could go in and tell you what CHAMPS stood for, because they had it posted somewhere in all of their teacher. Can you imagine now? They're really gonna be, okay, the C stands for this and blah, 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 and then talking all about it. They're really, really, I think it's gonna work. I mean, the kids will understand too, because everybody will be talking the same language.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We look forward to this. All right, our next agenda item is the TASB Board Policy Update 118.
Good afternoon.
She's back.
I'm back. Didn't go very far. And the team is also back, the full cabinet team. TASB Update 118 is a response to the last legislative session, but with it also comes some local policies for board consideration and approval. Let me give you a quick overview of the process itself. This particular update, 118, deals with the primary session of the last legislative season, not the special sessions. That's going to come later in update 119. What the team does is we take all of the new and different policies that TASB sends us, and you better believe I have a spreadsheet for it. And with that, we assign different leads. Julie's a lead on so many, Kevin's a lead, and you can see the team here before you. Each lead goes back and looks at the legal policy, and while the board, the legal policy automatically comes because it's law, what happens sometimes is it will predicate and have us make a change to practice and or local policy as a result of the change in the legal. So that's the lens by which we look at the change in the policy. And so what we're going to give to you today is an overview of what our findings were with each of those policies and some highlights from some of those that maybe didn't require a local policy change, but are interesting and just kind of in that area. So we're going to go in each functional area of policy, beginning with Board Policy A, Basic District Functions. This one is me. In this situation, we're looking at basically the accountability system. I pulled two out, there were many. But in this year and under this particular climate with COVID, no campus will be given a rating lower than a C this school year. You'll get a not rated rating. That's part of the legislative legal changes that were made just recently. There's no local policy to update, but I do think it's interesting to know. So all campuses and across the state and all districts will get an A, B, C, or a not rated for this coming school year, or for this accountability year, which will be published in August. With that, there's another policy there, AIC legal, which is connected to it. That just deals with the support structures that are required for any campus that is not rated, in terms of how to help students regain any interrupted learning and academic ground. Board Policy B, local governance. There were some small and interesting things that kind of surfaced under the legal policies for local governance. And again, this is not extensive or exhaustive rather, but just a few that I pulled out. It does discuss how to conduct runoff elections. It also notes that text messaging is now considered political advertising, and it's part of campaign ethics, just to kind of keep it on your radar as we head into those seasons again. It requires some safety training of trustees, just verifying what those are. And then also some new and different practices for the school health advisory councils, the SHAC, about it being public meeting and records and all of those types of things. So nothing really monumental changed here, but just a couple of small things to bring your attention to. And then we move over to business and support services.
I think mine that we threw on here is up first in policy CFD. There were some minor wording changes in that regarding accounting for activity and district campus funds. Mainly guidance from GASB that's come out in the last couple of years, and some changes that they had made, just clarification mostly in that one. And this is made to put that in guidance with, or alignment with TEA's Financial Accounting Systems Resource Guide, or the FASREG as we call it. And so we're recommending, this is one of them, that they did put out a new local policy, and we're recommending adopting that. That updates the old one that was from 2009. So there's been no changes in that quite a while. So that's our recommendation to adopt that local policy that they have there.
And then the next two are mine. So the CNC Transportation Management, I just wanted to put that up there just for your information. They did repeal the provision on mandating the emergency evacuation training of buses. However, I wanted to make sure y'all knew, we did this before they mandated it, and we'll continue to do this after they repeal it. So it's just one of the things we do with our bus riders that first week of school. And then the other is related to cybersecurity. They now allowed anyone to report that we've had a cybersecurity breach. So not just I need to report that for them. And then the other is, we had two bills that passed just like minutes between each other. One said that everyone will continue to do the cybersecurity training, and one said that only the cybersecurity coordinator will have to. Well, guess one which came last was the one just the cybersecurity coordinator. However, we fully feel this is probably going to flip back come to the next session. So we're going to leave it as part of our annual trainings, but we won't, get on to people if they don't get it completed this coming year. So it'll be something we'll offer up and ask them to complete. I think it's Carol.
You're on. You're good.
And it's DEA, the first one I'm going to talk about is talking about compensation benefits. And what DEA has done in this policy is they prohibit districts from charging the surcharge back to the employee if we hire a retiree. In the past, we were able to take the surcharge that would cost us to employ a retiree and roll that expense back to the employee. They no longer say that we do that. And then the other thing they did is they temporarily gave us an exception from the TRS surcharge. If we hire retirees and put them in mitigating learning loss areas until February the 1st of 2025. And then the other policy is DFE, and that's termination and employment resignations. And this limits SBEC's authority to sanction teachers who resign after the 45th day before the first day of instruction and before the 30th day, that instruction date. Right now, or it used to be, they couldn't resign after the 45th day without the possibility of having their certificate sanctioned. But now they give grace to those employees who resign between the 45th and the 30th day prior to instruction if there are mitigating factors that the employee has become
The last one under personnel is related to counseling, and this is the bill that passed that said 80% of a counselor's time needed to be aligned to the state description of counselor duties. Thankfully, this was already something that we have been tracking for a number of years, where we do the time and effort study of counselors to make sure we're prioritizing their time for counseling duties versus other duties. And so that shift has been happening. This will move it further, don't get me wrong. As you know, at any given day, a counselor's asked to do a number of things, but really prioritizing their time on those counseling duties. And then moving over to Board Policy E, instruction, Mrs. Williamson has one for EHAA.
So the sex education curriculum and those kinds of things need now to be taken before the SHAC committee, the Student Health Advisory Committee. We have already adopted it for this year, so that'll go into place next year, but we don't recommend any changes in the policy as they've stated.
The next two on there, EHBC, the legal update there involves the Accelerated Instruction Committees. This is all part of House Bill 4545, and we've talked before about 4545. At this time, the local policy just basically says that there will be accelerated instruction committees for each kiddo in those circumstances, so we do recommend adoption of the local policy as written. And then EIE, the board actually approved revisions to this last year as we looked at the promotion criteria for one grade to the next, just clarifying the language for parents. The only difference to EIE local in this situation is again pertaining to those accelerated instruction committees as part of House Bill 4545, since promotion for SSI, the Student Success Initiative for grade level promotion based on star performance, was repealed under House Bill 4545, and instead those committees were put in place. So we recommend the minor changes that they've suggested, which is just a repealing of that language for grade promotion.
Okay, for policy update FDE, which is addresses the school safety transfers, the language was just amended to include disabled individuals, and we are going to recommend adoption of the TASC legal policy.
So you look at the next few, you sometimes wonder, where in the world did this law come from? Because they look like common sense. And so even though we look at it, we're recommending it for adoption, I can say that we, common sense-wise, would have maybe applied these across the board. So you see it written and you're like, okay, well, that's kind of what we were doing anyway in practice. But it's obviously written a little more, I guess, elaborately. But the first one has to do with attendance and compulsory attendance. If anybody's ever tried to get an appointment at the DMV, you know how difficult that is. We've all had children that have tried to go to get that, and you definitely, if you get one, you take it. You don't let that slide. They are far and few between. If you haven't done it lately, it's even worse. Every time I drive by Davila in the morning to go drop my daughter off, there's a line outside the door. So common sense would tell us that we're gonna let this slide. We've been letting it slide. This isn't a momentous occasion for the kids, and we're not going to hold it against them. Same thing with attendance for credit. I mean, I don't know who in the world would hold it against someone who has a serious or life-threatening illness or related treatment. I mean, that, I don't know, but someone somewhere did something, so now we got a law. But anyway, you can see our recommendation up there as well. So same for student welfare, child abuse, and neglect. It's many of these are already in practice, but somewhere someone in some district did something wonky, and they had to write it down. And so anyway, it's written down. We're going to adjust our local policy to reflect it, but in reality, this was the practice. We're kind of living this out on a daily basis.
And then the final section is community and governmental relations.
So this really comes out of the pandemic, but essentially what it's saying that if you're working remotely, but you're still working, you have to make a good faith effort to get a public information request done in a timely manner, which is considered 10 days. And then it also accounts for the temporary suspension of the Public Information Act due to catastrophes, which that comes out of the ice storm essentially. And so it's making an account for that to recognize that, yes, this is a catastrophic event, so you probably can't fulfill it in a timely manner. The expectation is you will fulfill it in a timely manner once that event is over.
So that's a walk down legal update and around the corner and back again. What questions can we answer for you?
Thanks for making that fairly painless.
I opened up the annotated attachment, and it was 900-something pages.
Yes.
It's just needless to say, I didn't get through all of it.
I move approval of Board Policy Update 118 as presented.
Second.
Sorry, was that Dr. Davis or? Okay. I have a motion by Dr. Harlan and a second by Dr. Davis. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Motion carries as moved.
Thank you.
The board will now convene in closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551.072 and 551.074. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in the open meeting. It is now 1:15. The board reconvened in open session at 1:52. No action was taken in closed session. And if there's no other issues, we are adjourned.